This game will be Gekko Moria versus Sabo. To start off with, of course, we shuffle our decks and draw our starting hand. We both decide to keep, so then we move on to setting our life and rolling to see who goes first. One thing to keep in mind, Gekko Moria is a black deck focusing on lowering his opponent's cost and then popping low cost cards, while simultaneously reviving his own from the trash. Sabo, on the other hand, focuses on placing high cost and high damage cards back on top of his life and then playing them back out using low cost. From the roll, it is decided that Gekko Moria, played by one of my friends, will get to go first. This is usually a negative, although less of one for Gekko Moria. For his first turn, he'll play Victoria's Sindri, which allows him to mill or send the top 5 cards of his deck to the trash. He will then pass turn. For my first turn, I'll start by playing Three Brothers Bond, an event that allows me to look at the top 5 cards of my deck and add to my hand one card that is a Portgusty Ace, Sabo, or Monkey D. Luffy with a cost of 5 or less. I choose to add a 5 cost Sabo to hand, and the rest go to the bottom of my deck. With only one Dawn left and no cards to play, I pass turn to my opponent. The first 2 turns, shorter turns like these, are actually fairly normal in this game. His second turn, he will give 1 Dawn to Gekko Moria, giving him plus 1000, and then attack. With 1 Dawn equipped and attacking with Gekko Moria, he can rest 2 Dawn to activate his effect. Choose to send 1 card from his hand to the trash and 2 from the top of his deck to the same. This allows him to summon 1 card with a cost of 4 or less and the type of Thriller Bark. His revival effect, he chooses the 4 cost Perona. In response to his attack, I rest 1 Dawn to play my event card Gum Gum Jet Spear, which gives my leader plus 2000, blocking the attack. For my turn at 4 Dawn, I have very little to do, so I simply equip 2 Dawn to my leader and swing for 7k, and he does not have cards to block, so he takes the damage. This being the very first damage of the game. And with that, I once again end turn. After drawing from turn, he immediately moves on to swing with Perona and then Gekko Moria for 5k each. Without any counters in hand, I have to take both. He then rests 5 Dawn to play Sabo from his hand. One thing to keep in mind, as you keep seeing him fan out cards off to the side, that is him checking his trash for any usable cards later on in the game. As I stated earlier, Gekko Moria relies heavily on reviving cards from his own trash and playing them straight to the field. He then gets to activate Sabo's on-play effect, which is to draw 2 cards from the deck and trash 2 from your hand afterwards. The event being Great Eruption. After checking his trash one last time, he passes turn to me. Now, after I draw and get my next 2 Dawn for a total of 6, I make an egregious error. I play my own Sabo, which allows me to send the top card of my life to my trash in order to pop a card with a cost of 5 or less. Unfortunately, thanks to my opponent's Sabo's effect, all of his cards are immune to KO until the beginning of his next turn. Fortunately, my opponent was kind enough to allow me to take the move back and return the card I trashed to the top of my life. With no other options, I equip 1 Dawn to my leader and swing for 6k. Unfortunately, my opponent managed to have enough counters in hand to block, so no damage is dealt. With no other moves to make, I end my turn. As for a quick update, the life total is currently 2 to 4, with my opponent having 4 life. I realized shortly after getting the footage that the life total were cut off for both players. To start off my opponent's next turn, he decided to swing with Perona. He then, after some careful consideration, decides to equip 1 Dawn to Gekko Moria, which allows him to use his effect by resting 2 more Dawn. He then decides to revive Absalom from the trash, and as the attack continues, I use 2 cards from my hand to block. He then equips 4 Dawn to Victoria's Cindy to swing with another 6k. After those attacks are finished, he ends his turn, passing it to me. Now, you may notice some strange cuts. These are because one common thing many One Piece players will do is that they will take a lot of time to count their Dawn, their cards, and try to figure out what combos they will go for. And because watching someone sit there and count their Dawn might be boring, I decided to edit those out. Unfortunately, my cutting work is still very choppy on account of me still being new. I apologize for any annoying looking cuts. Now for a final update on the life, it is currently 4 life to 1, with my opponent having the 4 life. Now of course the game isn't over once you drop to 0, as was stated in my introductory video, which means the number of hits to victory is 5 to 2. And with no more moves to make, he ends turn and passes to me. Now this next turn will be my final turn and last ditched attempt to save the game. To start out, I'll play a 1-cost Monkey D Garp, which, if you remember the effect of Three Brothers Bond from earlier, it's the exact same. It lets me look at the top 5 cards of my deck and add a Portgusty Ace, Sabo, or Monkey D Luffy to my hand with a cost of 5 or less. We'll add a 2-cost Monkey D Luffy to my hand, and then we'll equip 1 Dawn to Sabo to attack my opponent. He will take this hit. Then I'll equip 1 Dawn to my leader in order to finally use my leader's effect. With 1 Dawn, I can return a character with 7k or more and a cost of 3 or more from the field to the top of my life. Now, Sabo is normally a 6k, but with 1 Dawn equipped, for my turn, he becomes 7k, and so can be added to the top of my life. I will then play and trash a 2-cost Sabo from the field. This will allow me to resummon my Sabo from my life unrested so that he is safe from attack, and give plus 2k to my leader. This is in hopes that the 2k will save me from whatever attacks my opponent has next turn. With no other moves remaining, I will swing 8k into enemy leader, and with no other moves, will end my turn, passing it back to my opponent for the final turn of the game. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the effect of the 2-cost Sabo I played earlier. Make sure to remember that it gives me 2k until the end of my opponent's next turn. I certainly did not remember this. Now for the start of the turn, he starts by swinging Absalom into lead for 5k, and then swings Perona into lead for 5k as well. Now, where I mess up is that I decide to block these, as my leader would, under the effect of the 2-cost Sabo, be 7k, however I forgot about this effect, so it is still a valid play on my opponent's part, as keeping up with the game state on my side of the board is my responsibility. He then swings with an additional 10 Dawn on his Gekko Moria for 15,000. I would not have been able to block this either way, but having the extra counters in hand would have been nice. Now this is actually for game, despite returning Sabo to the top of my life the turn before. I also played him from my life using the 2-cost.